everyone. Welcome to Spirit Walking with Asa Hoffman. This is another episode of Perspectives on the Reemergence. And tonight I have a very special guest. She's a good friend of mine, Anna Bounds, who is a writer, professor, and she's a prepper. And she's written a book that actually I believe launched today. We'll find out in a minute. But her new book is Bracing for the Apocalypse. It's an ethnographic study of New York preppers' subculture. Anna, thank you so much for being here with me tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here in the middle of a pandemic and a heat wave and social unrest and high unemployment and you name it.
Yeah, it's been
and summer. And
a heat wave where I am. I don't know about where you are, but it's been a heat wave here. It was 97 yesterday, and today pretty thick with humidity as well. So not so fun.
Today was a cool 101.
Oh wow! So where are you right now at the moment?
Right now I'm in Virginia. I'm here spending some time with my dad. I haven't seen my dad since actually Valentine's Day. We celebrated that. I had some friends over, and we celebrated Valentine's at my father's, and I haven't seen him since then. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad to be talking to everybody, and I'm glad to be seeing my dad.
Yeah, it must be so nice to get some time with family. How has your family been? How have you been through this? Like, let's first start there, of course.
Well, as soon as you said, how have you been? I had this rush of emotion of all the things that I have felt, which I'm sure is similar to everyone else. It's been it's alternated between being a very stressful period about you being frightened for your family, frightened for your country, and then in other moments, so grateful for what you have and who you're with. And I think, all of us have gone through periods like that. We actually started, given that, I've completed this ethnography and given my, knowledge of prepping, we actually started prepping. We actually started preparing for the pandemic mid-January. And then I think the first week of March, which was 3 weeks before New York moved to sheltering in place, we were already sheltering in place.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, you know what, since you're here, what got you into prepping? Can we talk a little about what is prepping?
Yeah.
And
sure.
What got you into it?
Sure. Okay. Well, my book is about New York preppers and trying to figure out why so many New Yorkers now are interested in prepping. And so what's prepping? Well, prepping is basically trying to learn survival skills, bushcraft skills, sheltering in place skills to try to help protect your family during times of crisis, during disaster. In other words, trying to figure out what you can do to try to help your family because you become fearful that the government is going to be overwhelmed and unable to help you. So I'm sorry, please.
No, please, by all means.
I was going to say that relates directly to New York because when we take a look at the recent history of our city, really since September 11th, we have experienced so many different types of disasters. All of the types of disasters actually that preppers are concerned with, things like natural disasters, terrorist attacks. It used to be fear of pandemics. Now it's pandemics. We've experienced a pandemic, government and social unrest, technological collapse. When we think about our recent history, we have hit at this point, Asa, all 5 of those.
And my question, how many years ago, because it's been a while that I remember that you started talking about this. So about how many years has it been since you started to turn your attention towards prepping?
I started to turn my attention to prepping and to trying to figure out what it was all about because I could see that city dwellers were doing things so differently, and they were in the kind of people that I met were just so different from the stereotype that we have in our minds of preppers. I started really researching for the book. I started trying to get my mind around the idea of prepping and trying to be better prepared myself. Around, I'll say 2013, I started writing the book in 2017, and I spent 2 years really studying prepping and researching and interviewing and engaging in participant observation. In other words, going out there, with a prepping group and trying to figure out what it was all about. So it's been quite a while.
Yeah, and actually, just to be clear, so this is a part of, you're a sociology professor at Queens College, and this is a part of like an academic project for you that you also are making available like on Amazon. It's a pretty accessible academic project, actually, from what I gather.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really important for me, given the state of the nation, and given all the things that have happened in New York, and given the fact that I'm a sociologist and we're committed to the idea of making learning accessible, the idea of broadening, speaking to the whole community, not just academics. I wrote an ethnography that's in first person. In other words, it deals with much of it deals with my experience. I wanted something that was meaningful for me. Something that wouldn't sit on the library shelf. I think that I'm really lucky in my job, are fortunate, blessed, because in the kind of work that I do as a professor, I can teach things that are meaningful. I can teach things that make a difference, and I can also conduct research that is meaningful, that helps improve people's lives. Kind of my mission for teaching, and I've explained this to my students before. So if I have any students on there tonight, hello. The message that I have for my students is, I think the goal of learning is trying to change the way you know the world. And I think I'm doing that with this book. I mean, my experience has certainly changed, the way I think about my life as a New Yorker, and the way that I think about what I'm capable of. Like when I dig deep, okay, when it's the moment, when it's time to be on, figuring out that I'm much more courageous than I think, and have that sense of self-reliance than I originally, than I think at the start of this book. And you can see me doing my hands like this because I'm ready to go, yay, me, yeah, because.
Well,
yeah.
Tell me something that you discovered that you could do that you maybe didn't know about yourself. This process, or a way that you showed up maybe in this process, or had to show up.
No. I'm thinking about I'm thinking about all the different examples. One of the ways is that did learn cool things like how to make fire, which wasn't very easy, but learning how to do that, learning how to.
Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Tell me what you mean by make fire.
Actually, like make fire. In other words, to be able to have a nest of tinder and have a piece of flint steel and just a ferro rod and a knife and do it and make it happen.
So you literally, without the match, without the lighter, you're making fire now.
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, sometimes it takes me a little while, but yeah, I can do it. But here's the most important thing that I've learned that speaks to a lot of the different examples, and I think it's kind of a message that I want, since we're dealing with the pandemic and thinking about reemergence and thinking about adaptation. One of the things that I really want to share with people is a sentence that is a phrase that one of the preppers, his name is Marlon, taught me. He used to always say, prepping, the practice of prepping, the doing it, the learning all these things is to help you get comfortable in the discomfort. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned from all of this, because now, like when the pandemic approached, I didn't, there wasn't a moment where I panicked and waited for weeks and thought, what should I do? What should I be doing? I knew it right away, and most of it I had already done. So the whole idea of feeling that I have a stronger sense of self-reliance, a sense of a better, that I've already gone through these experiences, that I have some courage to be able to be the woman for the moment, so to speak.
Interesting, because I actually also think meditating and evolving ourselves spiritually and becoming more conscious and aligned in ourselves is about becoming more comfortable in the discomfort, because life on earth is truly uncomfortable and full of polarities, right? And while we have moments, many people think the spiritual process is about being able to hold on to those positive moments longer. And I think that actually becoming more connected or more aligned is about becoming more comfortable in your own being, so that those moments actually don't really matter as much. They don't define you nearly as much as what is happening inside of you.
Absolutely, yes.
It's a form of getting uncomfortable in the discomfort.
Right, and I think that it's about getting comfortable, right? The idea of being grounded, and I think that our work has definitely contributed to that, particularly in terms of meditation, the kind of skills that I have learned through the Authentic Creative Series, Authentic Creator Series. May I talk about that for just a moment?
Oh yeah. So for people who don't know, the Authentic Creator Series is a workshop series that I created with Marjorie Fine, and we've been teaching it over the last couple of years. Actually, this is from the Authentic Creator Series right here, the medicine circle on the wall, from one of our workshops. And Anna's been to all of them, actually. And there are these really powerful weekends where we really connect and align with the creative forces that are in nature that exist within us, and how to align ourselves with that and recognize that each and every one of us is a creator. Whether we are an artist, a lawyer, a sociology professor, we are all creators in the world. So how do we align with that to create what we're here to create for ourselves? So absolutely, bring it on.
Yeah, well, I want to say, I think that I'm very excited about my book. I've learned a lot about prepping, but one of the things that I want everyone to understand tonight, since I feel like we're kind of a family, since a lot of us meditate on Mondays together, and we also you have what is this is like speaker number 616, right? We've been doing this for some time now. One of the things that I really want everyone to know is that in writing this book, the Authentic Creator Series was really crucial to me in the whole experience of my being, trying to learn prepping, and then my trying to learn how to be a better writer, how to be more present, how to be more focused, how to be more in control of my creative energy. Those are hand in hand. I couldn't do one without the other. So one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to toast everyone, and I wanted to say thank you very much to everyone who's attended the workshops with me, everyone who's meditated with the group every Monday, and who has attended the talks, because this is an important milestone for me, but not really for me, for all of us, because there is no way I could have written this book and have kept the faith without everyone who's here tonight. So I just want to say thank you, and I want to express a special gratitude for Asa for teaching me so many writing skills in a way to harness my creativity so that I could be disciplined enough to write this book. So cheers, everybody.
I didn't bring a drink this time.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm nervous. A drink will help me. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I'm glad that it was impactful, right? And it's a community, and it's also remembering that everything we do is a community effort. We all need our support around us.
Listen, yeah.
So, obviously you're the one that actually sat down and did the work and went out and camped in the woods and did all of that. But the fact of the matter is, our community helps and impacts so much our ability to take that and channel it into something.
Yeah, absolutely. May I just give one quick example?
Oh, yeah.
About I call it ACS, about the series that was so helpful, because yes, I'm the person that sat down and did the work, but I needed to be able to have some kind of structure for sitting down and doing that. Like one of the most helpful things for me was the 28-day cycle, taking a look at the moon and the waxing and the waning energy, and trying to be able to write according to that. For me, that was a game changer, because it made me understand, the ebbs and flows of my writing so much more. So yeah, right on, brother, right on.
We did a 28-day moon challenge. That was a journaling process or a writing exercise, depending on where you were, for in alignment with the moon and in alignment with what phase the moon was in. So yes, that was really a lot of fun. All right, I have more prepping questions. Please. So I have prepping do's and don'ts. Can I ask you some prepping do's and don'ts?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let me just say this about prepping. When people think about preparing for disasters, there's two strategies that you take. Right? One is that you operate under the assumption that you're going to have to leave. And that is called bugging out. In other words, leaving the city. for New Yorkers. And preppers sometimes prepare to do that by learning how to pack a bug out bag, which we'll talk about in a moment, but basically contains all the emergency supplies that you would like to have. Everything from water and food rations to first aid kits to special medication that you may need, an extra pair of glasses, tarp, rain poncho, a whole variety of things. So that's kind of one way. And then the other way is the one that we're all kind of doing right now, is sheltering in place. And that's developing enough provisions, enough things that are meaningful to your family to be able to shelter in place, which is really what we're all doing right now. And I think when we think about the reemergence, we're thinking about two things. We're thinking about the idea of well, I guess it's really just one idea, trying to figure out how we shelter in place in, different degrees until a vaccine is developed.
Or other forms of treatment.
Or other forms of treatment.
Right,
yeah.
because also we might the vaccine is not the only answer. There's a possibility that we'll get good at treating COVID and we'll come up with effective treatments, in which case then it becomes before we even get to a place where we have a vaccine.
Yes, and that's an important point of clarification. And I took a pause for a moment because I realized in trying to set that sentence up, I was giving us only one option when there are many options.
Well, and I think it's the option that's been put out there early on with the government. I mean, it's been stuffed in our face. I just think that,
Agreed.
that generally take a long time, aren't always the right solution, might be the right solution. And there are also many medical groups or other groups that are looking at what are different ways of dealing with this. There's also a lot of alternative now and natural approaches that are being taken towards COVID. And some of them are really proven to be quite effective. So, it's going to be interesting to find out in the end what actually is effective and how we best deal with it as we go forward. And I think the truth is, and that's what makes this time so interesting. We're in a time where, I'm a freaking psychic, and I'm going to tell you the future is not predictable. There's so many variables that are going on right now. We're in a time where, we have to be careful to not over project into the future what we think is going to happen. Of course, we need to be looking into the future, right? So we can direct our path and be solution oriented. But at the same time, if we get too attached to any one solution, we're not present for what's happening, and we're not going to be present to pivot when we need to. So that's the reason why I'm bringing those things up. I think it's such an important thing. People have to shift their minds and broaden it and open it and realize that there's more than what's being put right in front of them.
Amen, brother. No, I agree with you. I think I agree with everything that you've said. And so when we think about prepping do's and don'ts, and I think I was just kind of trying to, okay, this is just talk. Okay, this is me putting it out on the table. I think that in thinking about the talk today, I think that the idea of a vaccine, even though we know there are other options and things, came to mind because then I was trying to, think about our conversation today, and reading the newspaper and taking a look at, the current, and I know we won't get to, we won't get into politics, but taking a look at
where do you want to go?
Okay, the current administration, and I was trying to frame in my way a way of conversation, basically talk about various elements of support, and I really wasn't feeling particularly grounded in the federal government, so I think I went for vaccination instead. But you're right, there are a lot of things going on. Here's the most important piece of advice that I have about prepping do's and don'ts. The advice that I have for people is before you rush and start doing things, this is what I want you to keep in mind, this sentence. Take stock, just don't stock up, right? And so what do I mean by that? I mean, we've already been, through several months now where we're in the throes of sheltering in place. Think about that experience before, and reemerging and thinking about making preparations for concerns that we may have, for the continuation or another spike in the fall. Think about things that your family eats, your family enjoys, the way that you live. And that means stepping outside of advertising, stepping outside of things that you see at the store, or that you receive, in the grocery store, or emails that you receive online that say, this is the perfect emergency kit for you. These are the emergency supplies that you need. Here's what will help save the day. Try to step outside of that and listen to your heart and your mind. Again, focus on meditating, focus on grounding, and trying to really get a sense of what works for you. Like, for example, one of the big do's that I have for me was that, given my experience with prepping, I thought carefully about the different things that we like to eat. I didn't buy vats of, orange goo, that happened to be on sale at Costco or Sam's Club or, anywhere else. I thought about, things that we might like to have, things that matter to us. And I bought, believe it or not, this fits in New York apartments. I bought a small chest freezer and put different supplies in there to make sure that we had enough food to eat, which was particularly, and it didn't, overpower the living room or or you can even store it in your bedroom. But the fact was, it saved us from having to go outside when it was best that we stayed inside. And also, it helped us deal with shortages better. So think about what you might like to have. Not just what you need, but things that are meaningful to you, whether it's a really good book, maybe something you've always wanted to read. Maybe it's a particular type of sweet treat. Maybe it's some booze, right? Maybe whatever the case may be. Give yourself, give yourself permission to have those. Remember, this is about getting comfortable in a stressful situation. So make sure that you have that. And by now you've probably figured out, in terms of those kinds of provisions, what your family needs. But the big mistake that I made, that I'm making changes for now, as we kind of continue to shelter in place, or let's say take a break from our regular hustle and bustle, might be the way to think about it for New York. One of the things that I realized was I wasn't respecting my daily routine, and I wasn't respecting the way that I live. And the fact that all of that now was going to be conducted within a box, right, within my apartment. And what I needed to do, and which I'm in the process of doing, is making sure that I have a good flow for the day. And what I mean by that is rearranging my space, my flow of living. Rearranging my space, rearranging my furniture, decluttering, getting rid of things, streamlining, to make sure that, as we continue and the weather starts to get colder and we're inside more, that I have a designated place for work, since I'm a professor, and I engage in virtual teaching, to make sure that I've let my family know that I'm going to be busy from, 10 to 12, teaching or doing research or whatever, so that they'll understand that that's reserved time for me, so that, someone won't come and say, hey, how about we do this? Or I can't find the screwdriver, or hey, I'm hungry. How about we make lunch? The idea of cutting out, of designating space in terms of your energy, right? And it also physically, designating a workspace, designating a space for working out, designating a space for, TV watching, all those different things.
Well, that's one of the big ones I was going to say. I think movement. I think that that people were, for all the people that prepped and got food and all these things to sit in, and they got ready for their Netflix and being on the couch. But so many people forgot to connect with, like, oh, how am I going to actually get the movement in that I need?
Right. Yeah.
And it's a big one. And I think that a part of prepping is, if you're one of those people that was thrown off, it's like, now we've been in this long enough, it's time to, first of all, get back engaged in your movement, but also thinking about, what are different programs, what are, some of the calisthenics maybe, or yoga activities, whatever the case may be, connecting with what is movement going to be for me if I don't have access to a gym, if we go into these periods, so that our life doesn't just become, I'm either moving and I'm out in the world, or I'm home and I'm still, and not moving physically at all. So that was a big one. I'm curious, with this, I actually wrote this down because I wanted to make sure I remember to ask this, because you had been prepping long before, like, as I remember, you have a prepping chest. Is that right? Do I remember that correctly? There's a prepping chest.
Yeah, I now have, it's exceeded a little bit beyond that, but yeah, I had a really great chest from the 1800s that had all these drawers and had all these supplies in, which I still do have. It's just now, I've given some more closet space to that too.
Well,
the
I know
idea.
for you also, like, in case like really bad shit happens, like you've got a tent to go in the woods, if I remember correctly, and you're ready to survive in many conditions. But my question is, given this pandemic and what's happening now, what are the things you would have done differently? What are the things that you discovered maybe that through this that you're like, oh shit, didn't think of that one?
Well, there are two things. Well, first, let me tell you the one that I think is really interesting. I'm now interviewing preppers and trying to figure out what they think surprised them, what didn't work for them. These are early days in the research, but here's the biggest concern that they have, that they had everything all set, like you said, in terms of provisions and supplies. But one of the things that they didn't think about was teaching their children, being responsible not just for home tasks, but also trying to figure out not just how to be a good parent, but how to be a good teacher and how to deal with virtual teaching and how to, think for yourself, when you're trying to teach your child and you don't have access to a lot of resources, how to go online and figure out how to teach your child the geometry that you forgot all about, right? Or, many other things. So that's a big thing, right? Trying to figure out how we're dealing with technology, both in terms of our own learning, teaching of children, and communicating with people online. That was a real game changer because I have attended many prepping, workshops and lectures that dealt with water filtration and first aid and how to build your own trauma, kit and how to deal with serious injuries. But no one has ever, had a meeting about something that I think is really important: the whole idea of fatigue of virtual meetings, right? Of getting burned out. That's a new game, for preppers, and it's a new game for all of us. There's a really good book that Priya Parker wrote that deals with trying to figure out how we all gather. It's called The Art of Gathering in Meetings and Things. And one of the big issues that I think is important for all of us when it comes to prepping and thinking about sheltering in place, and all of us trying to work from home, is she makes the argument that when it comes to gathering and, think about all the virtual meetings we have and things, that we don't need to gather more, that we need to gather better.
Yes.
And I think that's a big take home for all of us.
Well, that's one of the things I'm really curious to see what happens as we're watching companies. I mean, the whole face of the workforce is changing before our eyes, and in ways that, we can see, and in ways we have no idea, of course. But one of the ways that we can see is that a lot of these companies are going to be going like, oh, wow, people actually will work from home and get their work done. And oh, wait, they might even be more productive. And we don't have to spend all this money having people in an office all the time. And I think there's the real positives of that. On the other hand, I do think there's, 2D fatigue, which, being in these Zoom meetings and talking like this all day long, and people need, there's community, but only different than when you actually get together. And I think what's going to be interesting to see is how companies evolve to create community, how space evolves to create community, because that's really, if we're going to be really successful at this and expand it, I think that's going to be really an important part of that expansion, which is bringing people together in new and different ways to connect them with one another, not worrying nearly as much about people being in the office so we can watch them to make sure they're doing their stuff, because most people go to work, right? It's actually bringing them together so that they have the connection that they need to one another.
I agree with you, Asa, that sense of community. You know what, that was something that was really hard for me as a teacher, because one of the highs that I get, the thing that makes me realize I have a good work day, is when I've connected with my students and we've had a good, and we've had a good class. Not, trying to be able to re-gauge that and to connect with my students online. Man, that was a whole different game. That was really hard. That was something that, I I need to work on. And when I say work on, it wasn't that I don't think that, they didn't master the objectives for the class, but the way that, I was able to connect with them, because when, sometimes students, would just put their a photo up instead of, face to face. And when you teach, you rely a lot on nonverbal. So, and I think we all do in our jobs. So that's kind of, we're going to be learning that a little bit different, a little bit differently.
How big are some of your online classes? I know in person they can be very large. How big are some of your...
Well, that was one of the concerns. Fortunately, I taught in a Macaulay Honors class last semester, and we only had about 20 students in there. And then I taught another really special course, the Queens College course, which is for second year, Queens College Community course, which is for community college students who've just community college graduates, people who've just received their associates, who are now going into 4 years, a 4-year college. I had the privilege of teaching them, and that was all about creating community. So we worked really, and that was about 30 students. No, excuse me, that was about 20 as well. But usually my big research methods course, Asia, that has like 100 people in there.
I know.
I don't mean to throw up my hands in the air. We're going to have labs and smaller discussions. But, I think that I'm probably going to hold, in addition to regular office hours, I think I'm going to try and make myself more available and hold one-on-ones with students, according to their schedule, and really, connect with them.
So coming this fall, you're going to be having classes that will have 100 students in it.
I will probably have, yes, under normal circumstances. This fall, though, I'll be conducting research because I'm going to be working on some projects related to COVID, and trying to take a look at how preppers are responding to those. Because an important thing about preppers isn't just that they know what to do with their families, but they're also fantastic networkers, and they're an important part of community resilience, and they really help their communities. So that whole myth about preppers being these isolated, alienated folks with beards who only talk to themselves, no, way different. They're out there doing the work.
Well, since you're there, actually, since you went there, and we went to the isolated preppers, let's talk about mainstream prepping as opposed to crazy prepping.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Where's that line? Or you don't have to have.
Yeah. Where's that line?
Maybe think like, that's an interesting line, right? Have you so have you experienced anybody riding that line during your research while you were out there, sort of camping and involved in the prepping groups?
There's I'm just pausing for a minute because there's so many different ways to talk about this. But here's the thing. Here's I think one of the coolest, I think most important things that I learned about this project, I don't want to say from this project, but learning about prepping was, again, that New Yorkers do this because of direct experience. A lot of them have been on the short end of the stick in situations like, September 11th or Hurricane Sandy or the blackout. So they've realized, wait a minute, I need to figure out how to take care of I need to figure out how to take care of their families. And I'm laughing because that's kind of what brought me to prepping. And I don't really think we talked about it. I think I got off the subject. Yeah, I was just, coming up short. September 11th, the blackout, Hurricane Sandy. I was always the person who had, the flashlight, but no batteries, or then maybe the batteries, or no flashlight, peanut butter, no bread, right? I was always that person, because I grew up in the South and we were always worried about hurricanes here, right?
Yes.
And the funny thing is, I was so glad when I, moved to New York, because I thought, oh, I don't have to worry about hurricanes anymore. But I never really worried about them in the first place, because my father is he's a retired sailor. My father is a military man. And so we always had items in our house. We were always, prepared. I didn't do the preparing. In some ways there was a lot of sexism going on. It was my dad, the father, the husband, taking care of all of that, So anyway, so this whole idea of trying to, survive when things in the city started to change, it was a big deal. It was a big deal for me. So when we think about prepping in the popular American culture, and a lot of this comes from television and movies and even commercials, we see a prepper as an isolated individual. Usually there's a stereotype of the crazy rural, white guy with the beard and the crazy hair, living in a bunker, right? With all of his, tins of food and guns and ammunition.
It's an old school view, though.
It's an old school view, but still very prevalent because prepping still has a stigma. But I would say that's old school. In that case, people think, oh, I'm prepping because the government's coming for me. And whereas mainstream preppers, particularly New York preppers, are fascinating because many of them are people of color. Preppers aren't necessarily the white old rural guy, that stereotype. Preppers are Black, preppers are Mexican, preppers are Asian, preppers are old, preppers are young, preppers are rich, preppers are poor. It's very mainstream. If you don't think prepping's mainstream, let me ask you to reflect on two things. There's over 1 million things right now in terms of manuals and supplies that you can buy on Amazon related to prepping. Okay, when you go to Costco, they have a whole section of prepping supplies. I shouldn't say Costco. I'll say to a large box savings store like that. And when you look at the Pottery Barn catalog, there's a luxury go bag. Oprah's favorite things, that Christmas gift, holiday gift list that she creates every year, the one that comes out in December that people go crazy for. Last year, she had a bug out bag on there, a luxury bug out bag that was $500.
Yeah.
A rural, crazy white guy isn't buying that, right? Check it out online. It's beautiful. Amazon still sells it. It's gorgeous. I don't think that the supplies are necessary. Well, I think that you might be better off packing your own supplies and probably save a lot more money. But people are doing it now. It's just a secret. Look, with this pandemic, we're all preppers now.
Yeah, well, I think that's a big one. We're all preppers now. We all have to start thinking about what that means to us. And we're not all going to prep the same way or to the same degree.
Nope.
That's okay too. But it is about being in tune with the fact that the world is maybe not as stable as we allow ourselves to believe it is at times. And it doesn't necessarily we have to believe that it's all unstable and falling apart either, right? It's right. It's understanding that we are in a natural world that has, and an unnatural world, actually. Politics, our medical world, some of the research that's happening out there, there are so many variables of what could happen. And I think it's waking up to the fact that more and more now, especially, I do personally think that there's more and more things that are happening in the shadows, that are potentially dangerous to us, that we don't even know that are happening out there, like research in laboratories with COVID-19, and so it's more important to realize, like, your government can't always protect you, it's just not, and may not protect you, period. Even counting on that in the first place. And so
it may not want to.
That's right. So how do we take care of ourselves, and how do we, without having to be suspicious and just believe that, oh, the government's out to get me, but also at the same time realize whether they're out to get you or not, they may not be there for you when you think that they need to be, so.
Well, look. There's not. Let me just say this. I agree. There's 9 million people in New York. The idea that the government could help each and every one of us, with every disaster is unrealistic. It just is.
Well, and I think really it's our just realizing, like, is it going to happen in your time frame? What discomforts are you going to go through till they figure that out? Who decides what rations and what's going to come to you? Like, there's just so many different variables, and I don't know, if you don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't like being uncomfortable, personally. So my ass is like, oh wow, things are going down in a weird way. I'm going to make sure I put certain things in place because I know I like to I'm a tourist, right? I like my comforts, and how do I actually best make sure that I have those comforts in place for me? So that's where I approached it from. I have a question from somebody that I think is a good question. So
okay, all right, okay, good, okay.
So how do we prep if we're not Mark Zuckerberg with a 700-acre compound in a small New York City apartment when a major disaster like oh, wow, that's a really, okay, come on. You had to throw that one out there. Like a major
Yes.
disaster, like a biological attack. Is leaving town the only option? You know, I mean, I think that's, can I just say, I don't necessarily know that that's as far as, is that the only option or not? We don't know. I think the key is that if you're really going prepping, I think that that somebody like Anna would be ready to leave town if that's what it took. That's what I would say to that.
Yeah, but okay, here's the thing. 40% of my neighborhood left.
Mm-hmm.
They're still gone with the pandemic. I didn't leave. I stayed. I'm a New Yorker. I sheltered in place. I took a look, at what I had available in my very small apartment, what I thought would be available to me. And when I say what I had available, I don't mean that I had, a whole room of supplies. It wasn't anything like that at all. We had about, 2 weeks initially, worth of food. And then we extended it to where we had, I want to say, around a month. And we did that in a New York apartment. It wasn't anything that, it wasn't like there were all these packages of rice and all these crazy things, but we had enough supplies. So I'm with you. When it comes to prepping, I think that you have wealthy preppers who do the Zuckerberg thing, who have, they're not just building a compound. Actually, it might be complete now at his home in California. He also has, a compound in Hawaii. All of these all these billionaire preppers have places that they can go. But when I think about prepping, I put all that aside because I think about what I need for my family, what I need for me, how we live our life, what matters to us. I'm never going to have those things. And it's not that I'm being negative. It's not, that's just not my world. So when I think about prepping, I think about what matters to me, how I want to live my life. And how I want to live my life is how I always live it as a New Yorker and my apartment, right? And going places and doing things. The hardest thing I think for a lot of us with preppers as New Yorkers was not being able to go to public spaces, not being able to go to parks originally. I mean, you could, but parks, restaurants, get out in civic life and museums and enjoy our friends. There are lots of the thing that I think is cool about New York preppers is that they've learned how to prep within the smaller dwellings, like you've talked about. That's a real question. I mean, that's very important, and it's easy to do. There's no doubt about that. Go ahead.
But if something like this, if something were to happen where you couldn't stay, you are prepared to leave.
Absolutely.
You have the ability to leave, even if you have to walk out of the city. You actually have the supplies to be able to walk your ass over a bridge and out into nature and survive. Do you not?
Yes, I'll probably cry a whole hell of a lot, but yeah, man, I could do it. And look, and I have cried. Yeah, a lot.
But I just think, because I think the answer to the question is, if you're really serious about that, is that, you get a tent, you learn how to make a fire, you find ways to forage in the world, and you realize, like, if it really was to go in that direction and you're not somebody who can have that compound, and even if you have that compound and there's no way to know for sure that your compound isn't going to be in a place that's going to be targeted, right? So it's really knowing how to survive outside of all of those things at a certain point.
And part of survival, Ace, and I'm going to say this because this is something people don't really think about. It's not just getting a bag. It's making sure that your bag isn't too heavy, that you know how to use the things in it, that you can put it on your back, and you have a plan for actually walking outside of the city in the event you cannot leave by car or by public transportation or by flying out.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes work.
And I have a question. Does that seem, when you start thinking that way, right? When you're prepping that way, does it feel heavy? Does it feel fear-based or negative? Does it feel, where does it sit for you? I know you can't speak for all preppers, but I'm asking for you.
No, that's a beautiful, that's a beautiful question, because one of the things that in the beginning, there was a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety. And a lot of it was because I didn't know how to do it. So that's one of the reasons why these people have learned how to prep, because they've been, in really bad situations on September 11th or during Hurricane Sandy. And they thought, I got to figure out how to do this in case I have to. So for me, originally I was terrified. Now I think because I, through this group, have a sense of community and belief in the help of others and belief in the help that I can offer other people, it's not as scary. Do I sit around, dwelling on that? No. Did I find that a lot of the people that I interviewed did that? No. It's for many people. This is also, not just it's about preparation, but it's also community. And then it's also a lot of these people are type A, really super smart folks. And these are the kind of people that are like, well, you know what? Last time we had a blackout, we didn't have any electricity. Yeah, we had a flashlight. That was okay. But hey, you know what? I wonder if I could figure out how to build a generator. Let me try that. I mean, a lot of these people, are, folks who are at the top of their game professionally and are just like, I'm going for it. But it's an uncomfortable, it is a sad feeling, but I could do it, but when I think about it, you're making me dig deep and I appreciate it. That's the thing about being a friend with you. Asa, I think to hang with you, you have to be genuine. You got to put it out on the table. You really do. And look, and here's my thing. That weird, uncomfortable feeling that you're asking me about,
Mm-hmm.
I had that at the start of the pandemic. I think we all did.
Yeah.
Are we going to go? Are we going to leave? What's going to happen? And so, yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, I remember sitting in my apartment, right? And you don't know, right? It's not like there's a clear, you should leave, you should stay, this is what you do. Like, there's talking heads making, comments and this one, but even them, right? They can't agree. So it's really, you have to stop and connecting with you and say, what feels right for me? And as you say, what feels right for me and for my family? What is the best action that I'm going to take in this situation?
Yeah.
Or you listen to your dreams. I woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning. I knew what I was supposed to do. I had like a voice in my head and it was like, this is what you're going to do. And I was like, okay. I listened. And it worked for me, but I think each one of us has to find that in ourselves.
Hey, Asa, I have a
Yes.
question for you about that. I'm
Sure.
sorry. It seems like I'm talking a lot. I'm
Bring
just
it
digging
on.
it. All right. So here's my question. So I know, you woke up, you had that sense of, from, your guides, okay, this is what I'm going to need to do. But did you have that sense, at some point, like after you left or whatever, like, I made the wrong decision? Or were you like, this is great? Because I faltered for a little bit with sheltering in place. I got worried, like, maybe this wasn't the best thing.
No, you know what? For me, it was, so Michael and I flew in, I think it was March 14th or March 15th. I don't remember which day, but one of those we flew back into New York City. We were in Virginia Beach because he had his show there. And as we were coming home, we were both like, I just can't wait to get home. It was like things were escalating. I just can't wait to get home. I just want to settle in. I had already put some supplies in the house before I went to Virginia, just in case. Like you, I sort of was a little early as I started to see things happening. I started going, let me just, little by little, instead of being a part of the mass wave. I had enough toilet paper to get me through till about a couple of weeks ago. And that was already in my house before everything happened because I was like, yep, don't want to be out of that. Anyway, but so we really were going home and sort of resolved to be there. And it was 4 or 5 days later, it was the Friday after. So whether we came home Sunday or Monday, it was the Friday after that I woke up and literally had a voice that said, basically it told me I had 2 hours to book a space or I wasn't going to be able to. And literally, this is what I heard. I'm like, oh shit. I was like, Michael, we got to go. To which he's like, and of course, his first reaction, well, you just told me that you were excited to get home and we're staying here and started to do all this stuff. What do you mean we're going? And it's like, well, the voice was here. And it was funny because I went looking for places. I went looking at Airbnbs and they were all far too expensive for me. And so I couldn't get a space. And so I sort of sat back down in my living room for a minute there with my coffee and was like, you guys are screwing up over there because nothing's available unless you have another idea in mind, in which case you need to be more specific. And I kept drinking my coffee and then literally this person's face came in front of me who I had met at a party. She was a friend of a friend's who up here in the Rhinebeck area. And I was like, oh yeah, she told me about, she has a cottage on her property. And so I texted her and said, if you remember me, I met you at the party. You said to text you if I ever need a space, I'm looking to get out for some months out of the city. And she was like, sure, basically, yes, here's what I'll charge you, right in line with what I said. The whole thing, like we sealed the deal. And then an hour later, she texts me, you're so fucking lucky. Somebody just reached out to me who has stayed here before, offered me twice my regular price and wanted to book it for the next 2 months. It wouldn't have been available had it been another hour. She said, I'm saying no to them, of course. I'm not going back on our deal, but it's all yours. So they were right. If it had been a couple of hours, it wouldn't have been available and I've been able to be up here. So, but no, since we've been here, I don't think I ever thought we made a mistake. It felt right. But my lease also was up in the city. My apartment was one that we moved into last minute a year ago because we had mold in our house. So it wasn't like we were in the apartment that we loved. There wasn't as much attachment maybe as there would have been if it had been another year and a half before. I had my own apartment that I owned on the Upper West Side that I loved, and that was home. But this, we had made it nice, but it hadn't become home enough for me to feel that way. So this felt great coming here. Yeah, I mean, the hard part is I miss my city, but I also think a lot of what I miss isn't happening there right now. So
that's true.
And I'm not that far. I've been in and out. Yeah. How has it been for you getting out of the city and going to Virginia Beach? Was it odd? Was it?
This is the thing about being a New Yorker. It's sort of like yes, I'm glad to be here. I'm delighted to see my dad, but I did have a sense of like I was being disloyal by leaving. Like I was, I had that, and that wasn't. We left for a couple of days during the looting, and we came back, and I felt torn, then too, because I felt like, what, I believe in the city. I have a Ph.D. in urban and public policy. I live and breathe in New York, and I have just had the honor of having, this prepping group and all these independent preppers show me their way of knowing the world. And I'm going to say, hey man, you know what? I'm out. But so I wanted to shelter in place because as, one of the preppers said to me, or I guess to me, and then also later to the group, he said, look, we've all trained for this. We already know about sheltering in place. We already have our masks. We already have everything we need. We're good to go. So now let's try to figure out how to help our neighbors. And when he said that, it really struck me because I'm all about urban citizenship. It doesn't mean, I'm an angel, but, one of the privileges I think that I have about teaching at Queens College is that is our school motto. We learn so that we may serve. And that's me, I mean, like I said, I'm no saint, and I try my best, but so I guess your point is I'm really having, a great time seeing my dad. We even bought and it's an adult size inflatable pool for my dad's backyard. we're having like a blast, but we're riding our bikes and stuff. But yeah, I do feel kind of guilty, and I also feel less safe too, because I think that as much as we complain about people not being obedient and as much trouble we are, Asa, with we always get in trouble with the governor. I think that we're really engaging in social distancing and wearing masks and practicing good hygiene practices.
The overall in New York City.
Much more disciplined. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen back and forth. It depends. When I've been in the city, I've seen areas where I feel like it's been very good. There's moments in the park where I think it's been where I've seen people sort of in the middle.
A little shaky. Yeah, a little shaky.
Yeah, when I've been in the park in there.
Yeah.
And I love this, by the way, because you talked about one of the things you and I have talked about before is community resilience, and part of like there's prepping and there's taking care of yourself, but then there's also the community, right? And leaning in on the community and supporting one another and the importance of that. You know, as a matter of fact, I mean, you know, you talked about your prepping community, but maybe it's also a good idea for people to create community among themselves to support one another when these things are happening, if they happen.
Well, yeah, like our apartment building had a Facebook page where you could, you know, so that we could reach out and make sure that the people who were still in the building, if anybody needed help or, you know, if someone had resources or, you know, things like that. And also, you know, with the preppers, they set up not just within, you know, a prepping group, but form networks with people for exchanging information, exchanging resources, you know, you know, and trying to help, you know, trying to help one another. And that's just, you know, I think that's just, you know, being a good neighbor. You know, my dad has really benefited here in Virginia from, you know, his network of old retired bachelor sailors. They've been pretty awesome.
That's great.
And plus what we've been doing, you know, all of our work, you know. When I say work, all of our community. If we all didn't have that, you know, that's what grounded us. Grounds us.
Well, I think that's why really, like you were talking about staying in New York or not, I think everybody has to find what's right for them. I mean, I really feel like I've been able to lean in the most for my community by doing certain things that I knew I needed to do that would keep me in a good place to be able to give back in the way that I do. You know, we have to find what is it that we have to offer and how do we lean in with that? You know, that's like big time. I want to circle back to a couple things. Number one, you know, I don't know that we ever talked about this. So like people who are interested in learning more about prepping, where do they go? You know, where do they start? Obviously your book, which we'll go back to in a second, but also like group wise, any recommendations?
Okay, well, the advice that I have for New Yorkers is that there are two groups. For people who live in the city, there's the New York City Preppers Network, and they're interesting because they are about teaching people. You know, people are at the beginning, you know, at the beginner level, and then also working with people who are advanced. They have a range of programs, everything from class, you know, from lectures to intensive outdoor excursions. You can also find a lot on the internet too.
That's the New York City Prep Group?
Yeah, the New York City Preppers Network. And then there's also Urban and Outdoor Survival, which is a second great resource, which is a terrific resource too, a group. And they provide a lot of training, and they're based, I think, actually in New Jersey. And they're a good group as well.
And if you're not in New York City area, you're saying Google preppers in your area, and there's probably a group around, or do you think it's
no, that's no. Well, the advice that I would have would be for you first to check if there's a group available. There may or may not be. I would suggest that if there are different blogs that you can take a look at. You can take a look at different guidebooks on Amazon to try to figure out what it is that you need to know. There's a great website that for prepping gear that actually has a booklet that they can send to you that gives you a really good overview, and it's called Ready to Go Survival. This
is online?
Yeah. And I think I might just
website.
Yeah, I think it's Ready to Go Survival, and it's a prepping gear website. And my friend Roman owns it, and he is just a really knowledgeable, kind, and thoughtful person.
Cool. And so in your book, can you tell us a little about you know, what are we learning from your book, Anna? What do we learn in the, you know, where do we start in the first chapter and where do we end in the last chapter?
Okay. All right. Let me make sure that this is that Romans give, because I would hate to do a disservice. Yeah. Ready to Go Survival. It's a terrific website. They sell all sorts of things.
Great.
Yeah. And okay. So that's Roman's site. So with my book, I'm a little bit shy. Give me a minute. So here's what I love about my book. Okay, the thing that I love about my book is that we start off by taking a look at America in general in the first chapter. And then we focused specifically on New York, trying to take a look at why a city like New York, why city dwellers, not just New Yorkers, would be interested in prepping. And then from there, I take a look at, I take you on a journey of all the different types of preppers. And what I mean is I share my firsthand experience of being with, of learning from a group of dedicated preppers for 2 years. I also show you the flip side from, let's say, ordinary preppers to interviews that I've conducted with what we call HNW preppers, high net worth preppers, and trying to take a look at their plans, which normally involve having a safe room, escaping to a safe room, or to exotic destination. And it's interesting when you think about that, because there's some arguments to be made, and some people have raised this argument that kind of prepping, you're sort of opting out of the collective experience and helping one another if you just remove yourself, right? And yeah, so I think it's a fun read. I think that in it I talk about all different types of experiences. You know, I discuss different strategies. You know, what goes in a bug out bag. I think it's a meaningful read for regular people. It's not a how-to manual. It's more about reflections and experience and trying to think about how we go forward as Americans, and why New Yorkers now I think need to have both street smarts and survival smarts.
And then, so because you alluded to this a couple of times in different ways, you know, is being there for your community, not bugging out, and being prepared to show up for your neighbor, like an important part of prepper culture?
You know what? Yeah, that's an important point. Here's one of the things that really surprised me. You know, I thought that a lot of, you know, I shouldn't, if I hadn't known them, it would have surprised me. You would expect that a lot of preppers just bugged out, but they didn't. A lot of people sheltered in place, one, because they were prepared to do it, and also, you know, so they could serve as community resources, you know, which they certainly did. Here's the thing about the idea of bugging out, and this goes along with the stereotype of people thinking that preppers are always these isolated, you know, alienated individuals. When people make bug out plans, it's not just usually with their family. They usually have plans to go to stay with a family or friend, or more importantly, they have, you know, a safe house or a place arranged where a group of people will meet together, not just their families. So again, it's always community. And that was the big surprise for me, you know, because I thought that it would be a group, because the group that I studied with practiced together and trained together. And then some of them have made the decision that in the event, you know, that they will survive together. And it's worth noting that, you know, when it came to this pandemic, you know, almost every prepper, you know, that I interviewed reached out to me to ask, to make sure that, you know, to basically see if I needed any help.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So you've stayed, that was going to be my next question. Have you talked to your fellow preppers and been in touch?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I want to see, you know, what, so, you know, they've been preparing, you know, for years now for something like a pandemic. So I want to figure out how people, you know, what people, their do's and don'ts. What did they learn? What do they need to learn? What did they do really well? What do they need to do differently? And what do they need to learn? That's the next step there.
Did you have masks and gloves and things already in your house before all of this? Were you ready to go?
Absolutely. Yeah, Scott. Yeah, absolutely.
What about hand sanitizer?
Yeah, but not as much. But you know what? They held a cool meeting and taught people how to make that. We had our mask and things, and Scott actually started flying to LA in January with his N95.
Oh,
yeah, because we were like, boom, yeah. So we were already ready.
Anything that was absolutely useless that you had in your storage box? I mean, not obviously you weren't pulling out your tent during this, but that's not necessarily that it's useless. That wasn't necessarily serving in this, but was there anything that you were like, oh, yeah? Probably didn't need to have that.
Well, sheltering in place is different from what's in your bug out bag. Your bug out bag is for outdoors and outside. Your prepper's closet is for sheltering in place. And if I sounded like a nerd, I guess I am. I knew the difference.
I love the separation. That's really great.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's the thing.
you have your shelter in place closet and your bug out bag over there.
yeah, but no, we were good. Was there anything that, we were really out of? I mean, it's just the two of us, so we didn't really, we really didn't run low on, on anything. We could always buy, we could always buy more. A lot of people think, preppers are hoarders and they stockpile and things like that. I don't, I think that they have like 2 weeks supply or however long they feel they need to have it. But I don't think, they're not the people out in the Costco lines, filling up their thing and, banging into folks.
Yeah, no, I'm pre the Costco lines. I start early, but I am a little older around the dog supplies. My dogs can't, so supplies. We start stocking up early. Michael and I were like, okay, wait, let's start filling the closet. We'll figure out what we'll eat, but we have to make sure we have their food.
And that's because you love them. That's super. Yeah, that's super sweet. Oh, you know what? I want to put in a plug. Hold on, let me turn this around. When I say a plug, because when we're talking about things and what we do about sheltering in place and what we think about, I'm old school because I actually have a hard copy. But for people who haven't checked it, one of the things that I think has been a outstanding go-to for sheltering in place has been the at-home section of the New York Times, because it has so much information, everything, about everything from cooking to things on Netflix, to virtual museums, exhibits, all sorts of things. It's really rich. So use games you could play, all the different types of experiences. So I think that if you're not already checking that out, I think that you should. They even did a great thing on how to give yourself a haircut. I didn't do it. Oh, that's another thing. Hold on. You want to say what was a prepping don't, Asa? They need to teach people how to do highlights, because I was looking rough. Wow. That's what we need. They need a whole lecture on like how to cut and color hair.
I feel like when I do my last episode of this series, next week I have another guest, but the week after will be sort of my wrap up. And I feel like I need to get a picture of my hair through the last few months, because I have not cut it. It looks like I've styled it different ways, but I have not cut it.
Well,
hey, since you pulled out, that from behind you, talk to me about those books. Is it just a prop, or is that something significant?
No. I don't know. For those who read my bio, I put in there, and I don't know if you do this, but I totally do. Whenever there's someone on television and they're in front of their bookshelf, I always I'm obsessed with what people's books are, what they're reading, their antiques and all of this and that. So I brought these with me because these are, I wanted to share with you. The answer to an important question that I asked people. The question that I asked people for this book, one of the best questions was that if you could only take one book with you, right? Mm-hmm. One book, and this would be like the book, what would it be? And I had, basically there were 3 books that people often reference. So it was one of the 3. So I wanted to share what these are. So I have a stack over here. And it's pretty funny. And I wonder if anybody already spied and tried to read my titles like I do. I think the person that has an interesting one is Prince Charles. Whenever he's on, he always has these equestrian murder mystery books and things. So here's a book that was pretty common. People chose the Bible. That was a book that they would leave with, or the Bible, or another important religious text. Depending on their particular religion, it was always their main test. Not always, but pretty often. Here's the one, and I apologize because I don't have an anthology. Here's the one that a lot of people chose, and I chose it too. If you can see this, I have Hamlet, I have Romeo and Juliet, I have Henry V, and then I have Macbeth. A lot of people said they wanted that they would bring the collected works of Shakespeare.
Wow.
Because they'd never get tired of reading it. And I think that they're right. Because remember, it's not just plays, it's sonnets too. right? And then one person, one of my best friends said something really funny. He said, all right, well, while you read your Shakespeare and you wax poetic about how you're dying, the thing that I'm going to bring with me is the physician's desk reference so I can figure out how I'm going to keep living. That was pretty funny. And that wasn't even a prepper that said that. So as a nod to that, I have here a detailed first aid manual because I couldn't find a physician's desk reference in the middle of the pandemic at my local Barnes and Noble here in Virginia. So anyway, so those were the top three things that people chose. And I think given, the presidency right now, we might want to add the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, right? For psychologists, anyway, whatever. So those were the top three.
That's great. So wait, Shakespeare, we had Shakespeare.
The Bible, Shakespeare, and the physician's desk reference. My friend said it as a joke, but other people mentioned it too. Those were the top three.
So now, after hearing those three, would you change yours or would you stick with Shakespeare?
Shakespeare.
All right. You go. Okay. I've got just a couple more things and we're going to wrap up.
Sure.
But I did want to, somebody else asked another question and I just thought I'll get to that before I go back to where I want to go, which is how has this experience of the pandemic change your life going forward? For example, will you eat out as much? Will you be back out to the restaurants and things like that? Or, I guess they're asking, will you eat out as much? My question is both, like, how quickly are you back in the restaurants? And then also, will this change how often you eat out once things, if things were to return to normal? So I'll ask both ways.
We did order about a month and a half into the pandemic. We sometimes did order in, but by then we were already eating. So let me back up and again be truthful. Before the pandemic, seamless all the time. Okay, I'm ordering seamless, eating out, going into restaurants. Sometimes we would eat out 3 times a day. We're dinks. We can do that, right? And I enjoyed it, loved it. Yeah, New Yorkers. But the trouble is now when I order takeout, it doesn't taste as good. You know what? We've become better cooks. And we also aren't a little bit concerned, about what we're trying to support, our local restaurants for sure. But, I think now it just doesn't taste as good. Now, in terms of restaurants, that's a fantastic question because, again, I'm a social person. I love restaurants. The day before, I love restaurants. And so the point is, I can go to restaurants here, but I'm not doing it. I think it'll be a really long time before I eat inside. I'll have a drink and maybe, a meal out in, outdoors, but I won't eat inside a restaurant. No.
So you will go.
I'm sorry to say that.
If there's outdoor seating, if there's outdoor seating and stuff, you will patron a restaurant at this time. You would consider it.
Yeah, I have. But yeah, I have. But I felt it's a trade-off. I felt a little bit panicky after, and I guess other people did too. I think Paul Krugman also wrote a really beautiful piece in the New York Times, which is tragic, and talking about how basically we sold out the future of our children and in exchange for a drink. And then he talked about, reopening restaurants and things too early.
Wow. So he thinks that's opened up too early. I didn't read this piece.
Yeah, it's a powerful piece. But having said that, there were many times during the pandemic when I went to my local and got a margarita to go. Mm-hmm. That's how I roll. Yeah.
Well, you got to fulfill that Mexican blood.
I can't help it, man. I can't help it. But so that's a tough one, right? That's a tough one. I think it's going to be a really long time before I eat inside a restaurant.
It's so personal, and I've been very impressed with people who were ordering in really early on, and as opposed to people who are absolutely not at all. And it's been, it's a wide gamut out there as far as opinions and ideas on what to do. And I think also, I think a lot of people don't really know what they're going to feel till they get there. There's definitely those people that are out partying and don't care. I mean, we say that, you know, but I think there's a larger percentage of the population that's trying to figure out what feels right for them and what's the right way to go.
Yeah, but plus, we spent some of one that, you know, thanks to, you know, the New York Times, that was a reference to the Bon Appetit channel on YouTube and all these interesting videos they were showing. So we started watching them, and, you know, they taught us how to become better cooks.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I've been having fun cooking. I love to cook anyway, but I have come up with a whole bunch of new stuff. Okay, I have one more direction I want to go in,
okay.
which is so spirituality, you know, meditation, whatever you want to call it, you know, being connected. You know, I know that you know, feeling connected and connected to this your spiritual path, or, you know, your spirit energy is really important to you. And I want to know, through this, have you been able to maintain any type of practice, you know, and has that been important to you?
I wouldn't say that it's been important. I would say that it's been life-saving. Absolutely. Wow. Meditation, without a doubt. The grounding techniques that you have taught me, for sure. Because I don't care how many years I would have studied prepping. I don't care how many, you know, the person that I am, sometimes panic did set in, and also being an empath, the weight of the city, the sense of loss, the agony and anxiety that people had during this process weighed very heavily on me. So I needed that. And one of the things that people don't really think about when it comes to prepping is that they're also, you know, have many preppers also have these same practices to try to help keep them grounded, because the idea is, if, you know, you're grounded, you're less anxious, right? You're able to focus in an extremely stressful situation.
Or at least more able to redirect, right? Like it's, you know, okay, we get anxious, you know, the idea, you know, it happens, you know, but it's staying connected with our energy and in keeping the agility, you know, within our consciousness to be able to adjust and move as we need to, even while being uncomfortable, even while going through the discomfort. It actually circles us right back to where we started when you talked about, you know, so much of prepping is about getting comfortable in the discomfort. I think also, I said immediately after, you know, meditating and becoming more aligned and connected spiritually, same thing in a different way. So
no, I don't think I man, I felt like such a, you know, even though, you know, I was prepared, but such fear and you know, a sense of loss for my city. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you took a walk in some areas, you know, if you were able to, or you would see on the news, you know, the 18-wheelers, you know, that we're serving as morgues and other things. I mean, you need spirituality, you know, because, and during a disaster like a pandemic, you know, when you turn inward, there has to be something to turn to, right? You have to have I don't want to say a healed heart, and it's not open heart isn't the right word, but you have to have that sense of spirituality, that sense of faith, that sense of belief in a higher being, and a belief in others, and a belief in self. You know, sometimes just to get up and get fucking dressed, you know, excuse my language, but, you know, if you don't have that, you don't have anything. And the most remarkable thing for me is the moments during this pandemic, and exchanges that I have had with students and with even my family members and neighbors. You know, I wouldn't have been able to find those moments of grace without it.
Those moments of grace. Wow, everything you said was so beautiful. I'm so glad I asked the question. Dude, and so right on.
It's true. I'm telling you, you know, whatever, you know, whatever grounds you, whatever gets, you know, whatever good thing gets you through this, you know, lean on it, rely on it, cultivate it, honor it, because we're going to need it, you know, for some time now. Not just, you know, I'd say we're maybe halfway through. I'm not being, again, not a public health expert, but I'm just saying, I just feel like we're at the halfway point and we're all thinking that we're all working towards re-emerging, but just,
Yeah, I think we're halfway through at best.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. I'm just gonna really reiterate that, which is to cultivate it. Cultivate a practice. If you haven't had a practice, but you already have a belief or an idea, begin to cultivate a practice. Build a living relationship with whatever your spiritual pathway is, a living relationship, one where you actually embody it and walk with it on a daily basis, because it really can be all the difference in the world in getting up, as you say, and getting into the fucking shower or whatever that fuck was that you had put in there.
Yeah.
But it was the right one.
Sorry, I promised myself I wasn't going to say that word, and I did. I apologize, everyone, but
on every episode we've had at least one fuck bomb, and we've had a couple on this.
Sorry, yeah,
We're okay. Anyway, yeah, it's so important. I'm glad I asked the question, because to me, obviously, it's been the orientation of my life, and so everything else sort of spans from that. So it's really nice to hear, your reflection on it.
Yeah, true.
Wonderful. The book, I believe, okay, let's just circle here. The academic book is like mega expensive, right? Like it's an academic book, and they're generally outrageously expensive, as I remember. So am I correct?
Right.
It's outrageously expensive.
Here's the thing.
Wait. Is the academic book? No, answer my question. Don't go off on. You're good at going off. Wait, stay with me for a minute. Is that academic book really expensive? The actual physical copy that's out there? Yes. Over $100. Yep. Okay. And then there's a digital copy now that's been released, I believe, today. Right?
It's available now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is that on Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then, for all I know, Michael might have already helped me and posted this for you guys, but in case not, Amazon, what is it? Bracing for the Apocalypse, Anna Bounds. Now you can say whatever you want to say, but I just had to get through this, because it's so shocking how expensive these academic books
Well,
are.
yeah, academic books are really expensive because the idea is that institutions purchase them. So they only purchase, like a library, one copy for thousands of people, right? So it's much higher. But I've written a crossover book, not just a book that's for scholars and researchers. The paperback is not yet available. That won't come out, I think, for about another 8 months or so, 8 months to a year. But what's available right now is the Kindle version, the ebook version. You can read it on, I'm saying the Kindle version, but it's the ebook. And that's for, the regular ebook price. So it's, and as I'd love for you to read it. I would love for for people who are interested in prepping, or maybe have some questions or want to, connect with me. Maybe you're someone who you're trying to figure out how to shelter in place in your New York apartment, or you just want some sources. Feel free to reach out to me. You can go to annamariabounds.org. And it has all my contact information and information about the book, and all of that. Because one of the things that I would love to continue the experience of helping you figure out how to prep and how to protect your family, or even if you have just some questions, so just some general questions about this. I'd really love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out.
That's great. Anna, thank you so much. I really agree with Suzanne, who said here that this has been a terrific conversation, and thanking you, Professor Bounds. So, thank you, Professor Bounds, for being here tonight with me. Yes, she is the best. You're getting praise now in the chat. You are the best. And I knew that already. I've known Anna, God, it's been like 15 years or something, hasn't it? That you and I have.
Yeah, it's been a long time, brother. We have been through it.
Been a long time. So, I've moved several times since then. That's how I know I count houses.
Hey, Asa, I believe in your song. You're doing something amazing here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know what? It's what I felt like I needed to do. I woke up and this was my way of leaning in. I'm about community, and I have a large extended community, people that I feel very connected to, that maybe aren't really a part of my everyday life. But you know, with what I do in my work, people come and sit in that room with me, and it's an intimate connection. You know, I feel like I share love, you know, a really special, sacred form of love with each and every person who's ever sat in that chair across from me. And that's several thousand people. So I just thought, well, you know, how do I lean in? And so this was one of the ways that I could, and I could pick from those people and say, like, you know, I mean, there's so many, I want to share everybody with everybody because I think they're all amazing. But pick from them and say, like, you know, who might be resourceful at this time and somebody interesting to listen to. So, and you're one of them, Anna. So thank you again. I loved
Thanks for the
having you on.
honor.
It's been a lot of fun. I love your
Yeah,
set back there, by the way. Love the orchids. I mean, awesome.
Between two orchids, like between two ferns. That's I appreciate it. Thanks so much, everyone. Again, reach out if you'd like to. Please, everybody be safe. Okay? Take care.
Bye.